We're going to look at how the tentacles of the Southern Poverty Law Center are intertwined throughout the federal government, including all the way up to the White House. Now, this is a junk mail fundraising firm that, oh, by the way, had a staff attorney arrested earlier this year on charges of domestic terrorism in Atlanta. And they said he was an observer there. Actually, that's even worse because he was defending Antifa. Now, their hate map, as I mentioned earlier in the program, inspired another domestic terrorist, Floyd Corkins, who attempted mass murder here at the Family Research Council 11 years ago. And now this same organization has brought this same danger to concerned parents working to protect their children from the indoctrination of the left in schools paid for by the parents' tax dollars. Joining me now in studio to discuss this is Tyler O'Neill. He is the managing editor of the Daily Signal, another great resource out there for you, and the author of the book, Making Hate Pay, The Corruption of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Tyler, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for coming in the studio.
Always a pleasure to be here.
So you wrote the book on the SPLC, and we've known for a long time that they are a sleazy, leftist group. They're the attack dog for the left. But, I mean, have they gone too far this time, actually going after parents who are showing up at school board meetings?
Yeah, you would think so. This organization is utterly, morally bankrupt. But, when the SPLC went after Family Research Council and Alliance Defending Freedom, I thought it couldn't sink any further. Now they're putting concerned moms and dads on the list. The very people who elected Glenn Youngkin here down in Virginia in 2021. And, it's to call it jumping the shark, I think would be a vast understatement of how far this move has gone.
But could they just be intoxicated with their own headlines and power, where they're clueless that they're out of step with the vast majority of Americans? Now, I mean, they came after us. We were I guess we were the first, outside of their traditional groups that they go after. And so we were kind of alone, and people, you get the media marginalizing groups, and they begin to think. But they've broadened the net so far that, half the country can't be hate groups. I think even non-reasonable leftist liberals are thinking, wait a minute, can half the country be a hate group?
Well, I think what you're seeing with the SPLC is that they're in their own bubble.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times the left likes to demonize anyone who speaks out against the extreme way they've been pushing LGBT ideology in schools. The way that they want the notion that a school would encourage a child to identify as the gender opposite their biological sex, and put them on hormones and these things that will change their lives forever, intentionally keeping parents out of the loop.
Right.
Making parents not aware that the kid might identify this way. But the SPLC is trying to cover for this extremely radical movement.
They're providing the cover.
So they're demonizing the people who come out and say the truth about it.
And frankly, they have every right to do that, okay? And I said this earlier. They have a right to be stupid. This country gives people a right to do the wrong thing.
Yes.
But
within limits, there is defamation. Yeah.
Yes, I understand that. But my big issue, Tyler, is that they are using the levers of government to accomplish this. It's not a fair fight, if you will. It's not just their voice and our voice. It's their voice intertwined with the power of the government.
Yeah, and they've long been encouraging law enforcement to monitor and go after hate groups. Now these are, anti-government extremist groups.
So how do they get by with that when their own staff attorney was down where they were literally attacking a law enforcement training center outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and they want to act as if they're an ally to law enforcement? They're anti-law enforcement.
Yeah, well, this is the interesting thing about the SPLC. They talk out of both sides of their mouth. So on the one hand, they're saying, oh, we need to have law enforcement crack down on terrorism, by which they mean conservatives who are speaking their values in the public square. And on the other hand, they say, oh, but we can't trust the police because they're institutionally racist.
So how do they get by with that?
Yeah, it's
The media?
It's doublethink.
Is it the media? The media?
It's partially the media. It's partially the government. I mean, as you were talking, the woman who's behind the intelligence project, Susan Cork, had a meeting at the Biden White House, and the SPLC has been working with the Biden White House on their domestic terrorism strategy. So, I mean, this goes all the way up to the top, and President Biden nominated the SPLC attorney, Nancy Abudu, and I mean,
Right. Oh, she's
FRC
radical.
was on the front lines trying to block her confirmation, and somehow she actually made it through the Senate. I'd still like to hear a real response from the Democrats on that.
So I want to go back to Susan Cork,
Yes.
who was the author of this report, meeting in the Biden White House back in January of this year. This looks very similar to the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, and the infamous letter regarding parents in going to school board meetings and the collusion that we now know took place between the White House or the administration and the National School Boards Association.
Yeah, I'd say your sense of deja vu is right on point. What we're seeing here is the Southern Poverty Law Center. It's almost like the Biden administration is outsourcing its attack on parents to the SPLC as their partisan attack dog, so that the next time there comes an opportunity for them to sick government troops on concerned parents, they can point to the SPLC and say, look, they identified these as anti-government extremist groups. We should monitor them. We should put them on our own.
But they again, not to beat a dead horse, but I think they may have gone so far because I've been, in fact, had one of the moms from one of the parents groups on the program yesterday, and their response was, "Hey, we're going to wear this as a badge of honor that we finally have been recognized by the Southern Poverty Law Center." And I'm just wondering, actually, I could see groups saying, labeled by the Southern Poverty Law Center. I mean, it's almost a badge of honor among conservatives.
Yeah, I would consider it more of a badge of honor if it wasn't the case that a lot of times when you Google these groups, the Southern Poverty Law Center smears are the first thing that come up.
Yeah.
I'd consider it more of a badge of honor if organizations didn't struggle to still raise money and to gain the attention that they deserve in the media because the SPLC was smearing them hate groups. I think this still carries a lot of negative weight, even though people like you and me, we know not to trust the SPLC.
But see, that's where I think is they put more people into this pot, and then you see actually corporations. I think one of these corporations are now going to have to answer for this. That after Charlottesville and after
George Floyd.
Floyd, you had all these corporations, falling over themselves to give money to Southern Poverty Law Center and Black Lives Matter. And it's now you have these same parents who shop in some of these stores and use these corporations that are being demonized by the Southern Poverty Law Center. I would have to think that, some of these corporations have some liability there.
Yeah, no, and I would say to the concerned moms and dads out there listening to us right now, you should find out which organizations, I think it was Apple, JP Morgan Chase, which companies have bankrolled the Southern Poverty Law Center, and make a point to, if you have to shop there, raise your objections, but otherwise avoid them the same way that they're successfully doing with Bud Light and Target.
Speaking of money, how much money do they have?
$730 million, almost $750 million in their endowment, and offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands with millions of dollars. And those are the ones that they report to the IRS.
And they just keep raking in this money, selling hate.
Oh, yeah, selling exaggerated hate, which their own former employee said was exaggerated. He said they're part of the con. They know that it's a highly profitable scam, and it remains highly profitable.
I mean, you even had the FBI cited recently the Southern Poverty Law Center research when they were calling for surveillance of traditional Catholic groups.
Exactly. And that thankfully, a brave whistleblower released that memo, and the FBI decided to retract it immediately. But I mean, this should still raise alarm bells for Americans across the country, because these conservative Catholics, and look, I've spoken with a few of the Catholics on that group, on that list, and they're not haters, they're not anti-Semites, they're not whatever the SPLC is spewing, and they don't deserve FBI surveillance. And I've spoken with members of a church in Virginia that say that they saw what they thought was FBI surveillance at their mass. So this is a real problem, and the very fact that this memo exists suggests that Merrick Garland has behind the scenes issued an order telling the FBI that it is fine to cite the Southern Poverty Law Center, because we know from former Attorney General Jeff Sessions that he issued an order specifically saying the opposite. So the only way the Richmond memo ever could have emerged is if the FBI reversed its former policy.
So I just got a few minutes left, but explain the connection between SPLC and Antifa. I mean, because have they listed?
We only have a few minutes left.
Have they listed Antifa as an extremist or a hate group?
No, they haven't listed Antifa as a hate group. They haven't listed, Jane's Revenge as a hate group. They haven't listed anybody on the left.
But all of them are connected with violence.
Yes, exactly. So the way they get around Antifa, they actually attacked, not only did they not attack Antifa or list them as a hate group, but they attacked the Trump administration for suggesting that Antifa should be marked as a terrorist group. And they're acting as though this was attacking free speech. Meanwhile, they're putting Family Research Council and Alliance Defending Freedom on a map that has been tied to domestic terrorism in the past.
And we have no connection with violence whatsoever. But the groups that they support and run with, I mean, that's basically all they do is incite violence.
Yeah, I mean, how do you define Antifa? You always see them in their masks, protesting, throwing Molotov cocktails at police and trying to prevent a police construction. Yeah.
All right, Tyler, what do we do? How do we address this?
Well, you can buy my book. Of course, everybody says that. But it's called Making Hate Pay. There is a concrete act that we can do right now to make the SPLC, to hold the SPLC more accountable. And that's supporting the Dustin Inman Society. D.A. King is the first hate group whose defamation lawsuit has made it to the point of discovery, which means he can request SPLC documents. But he desperately needs money to keep his lawsuit going. He doesn't have $730 million like the SPLC does. So you can support his lawsuit on GoFundMe and on GiveSendGo. If you just search Dustin Inman Society or D.A. King, it'll come right up. And please chip in some money to keep his lawsuit going, because his lawsuit represents the most concrete threat right now.
What attorneys are representing? Does he have private representation?
I believe he's pro se, and he's made it here on his own. So one of the reasons why he may not be pro se. That's one of the reasons he's trying to raise money. But lawsuits are not cheap, and he's not a lawyer by profession. So and he only made it past discovery because in this particular case, the SPLC said he wasn't a hate group, and then they said he was a hate group. And I mean, there are other examples, but they also registered a lobbyist to oppose a bill that he was supporting right when they decided to designate him a hate group. So I think there's clear motive.
Well, that's a MO of the Southern Poverty Law Center. I mean, just like they're doing to these parents, and this is not new, by the way. I didn't mention it. I think back in 2010 was a parents group in Minnesota that was opposing an LGBT curriculum, and the Southern Poverty Law Center labeled them a hate group. So this is their MO. If someone opposes the left's agenda, they slap this hate label on them to try to silence them.
Well, if you see an organization on the list, it falls into one of three categories. Either it's an effective social conservative or or immigration organization that's calling out the radicalism of the left, or it barely exists at all and it's just there to pad.
So they can make money and show more numbers.
Or it's one of these actually, teeny tiny, they do actually hate people and nobody listens to them. So those are the groups on the list.
Tyler O'Neill, thanks for coming in. Great to see you.
Hey, my pleasure. Always glad to be here.